Policy Advisor for the USCCB, a position she held since 2007. She works in their Office of International Justice and Peace, and her areas of focus include Eurasia, human rights, and religious freedom. Prior to joining the USCCB, Virginia Farris, will be coming up soon, had a long and distinguished career as a Foreign Service Officer for the United States Information Agency and the U.S. Department of State, serving in Pakistan, Tunisia, Hong Kong, Jamaica, Thailand, and South Africa. Virginia holds a BA from Michigan State University and an MA in Chinese Studies from the University of Michigan, and an MA in National Studies from the National Defense University. Virginia Farris will talk about something you may be more familiar with, all the religious persecution that we hear in the news, but she's going to help us shed light on current developments. Please welcome Virginia Farris.
No. Okay, no. Oops. Luckily, that's nothing I need right now. These are auxiliary materials, just in case you ask me lots of questions. Okay, let's get started. So thank you, Monica, and thank all of you here at St. Patrick's Church. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about international religious freedom, since it deals with critical issues of livelihood and survival in many cases. So in this brief presentation, I want to lay out a little background about international religious freedom, and give you some examples of violations, talk about advocacy and what you can do. So let's start with a few facts. More than 80% of the people in the world declare themselves affiliated with a religion. Even in places like China, the number of people following a religion is growing to the point that China, an atheist nation, that by the year 2050, 2030, could well have the largest number of Christians. At the same time, many people around the world are harassed, attacked, and ultimately killed because they are of a different faith. The Pew Forum, and I've left some resources back there that you can take a look at, has been tracking restrictions on religious freedom from both the governmental and societal levels from around the world. And their most recent study shows that 42% of the world's countries, that is to say 83 countries, have high or very high restrictions on religion. And because some of those countries are the most populous in the world, like India and China, basically 77% of the world's population, or 5.5 billion people, live in these countries with high or very high restrictions. And how do these restrictions manifest themselves? Well, in terms of government restrictions, they can run the gamut of preferential treatment to one religion, think about Saudi Arabia or Russia, to limiting which religious groups can legally operate within a country. And in more egregious cases, governments can demolish places of worship, ban certain religious groups, jail, torture, kill believers for distributing their literature or assembling for prayer services. Governments, even those that have signed international treaties protecting the freedom of religion and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, can still have laws that punish an individual for converting from one religion to another, because to do so constitutes apostasy, and in some cases, if you're accused of apostasy, that's a death sentence. In terms of societal restrictions on religious freedom, these can include harassment over dress, discrimination in terms of education, employment, where you can live, access to services, in some places even access to water. Some of these restrictions can manifest themselves in terms of mob or sectarian violence that a government cannot or will not control, or in religion-related armed conflict or terrorism, such as we've seen in the Middle East. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights speaks to the right to manifest freedom of religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance, and includes the freedom to change religion or not to follow any religion. So what are some of the examples of religious freedom today? Certainly, the Islamic State is a brutal reminder of people who suffer because of their religious affiliation. I think some of you remember the images on Mount Sinjar where Yazidis and Christians had fled for safety because ISIS, they did not want to conform to ISIS's extreme interpretation of Islam. They were often offered the very stark choice to either convert or die. Elsewhere in the Middle East, again, there were images in Libya where you had those 21 Christians lined up on the beach in the orange jumpsuits who were beheaded because of their faith. And that, again, was by ISIS. In Kenya, al-Shabaab gunmen stormed the university and killed many students. But they were singling out those students who could not recite certain Quranic verses. Obviously Christians. In Pakistan, a Christian mother, Asia Bibi, was convicted of blasphemy in 2010 and sentenced to death for blasphemy for daring to drink water from a communal well. She was just released this year, so she spent 9 years, some of it in solitary confinement, in prison, and was spirited to Canada to join her family where they'd gone into hiding. So she was a Christian, but as I say, it's not just Christians that have been persecuted in Pakistan. We had the governor of Punjab province, who was a Muslim, as well as the federal minister for minority affairs, who likewise was a Christian. And both of them were assassinated by extremists because they supported Asia Bibi and suggested that Pakistan's draconian blasphemy laws should be changed. The people who assassinated them, in one case the bodyguard of the Muslim governor, were all hailed as heroes. So overall, Christians are the religious group that face harassment in the largest number of countries around the world. So 144 countries. But they are not the only ones to face persecution. Muslims face harassment in 142 countries, so only 2-country difference. So let me offer a few examples that demonstrate the magnitude of the problem faced by thousands around the world. In Burma or Myanmar, Rohingyas who are Muslim are discriminated against by the majority Buddhist population. They are considered stateless and are denied access to education, health care, and employment. They face restrictions about where they can live, when they can marry, about the number of children they can have. So consequently, as a number of you may be aware, thousands, and at this point there are close to 1 million Rohingyas who have fled Burma and are living in Bangladesh or have gone south into Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, trying to barely survive. In Sri Lanka, the Tamils, who tend to be Hindu, and the Sinhalese, who are Buddhist, have fought for years in a bloody civil war that ended in 2009. And there are now some concerns that the Buddhist extremists are targeting Christians and Muslims. I think you may remember that just this past Easter Sunday there was a bombing of several Christian churches, and that presumably has been claimed by Islamic extremists. So there's a question now, whereas it was mainly Buddhist and Hindus before, now the Islamic element is complicating the religious landscape. In India, a country founded as a secular democracy, tensions between religious groups are rising. Since the BJP, which is a party the Hindu Nationalist Party was elected in 2014, and they were just re-elected this last month, religious minorities have come under increasing attack. Churches and mosques have been torched or vandalized, including St. Sebastian Church in Delhi. A Hindu nationalist politician who is female even publicly called for the forced sterilization of Christians and Muslims so their numbers would not increase. So Hindu nationalists consider Christianity to be a foreign religion, even though St. Thomas the Apostle is reported to have come to India about 2,000 years ago. And the number of Christians, even though they've been there for 2,000 years, constitute less than 5% of the population. But nonetheless, they are perceived as a threat somehow. Or maybe it's just we need to have some kind of scapegoat. So the Hindus, this particular Hindu nationalists are using Christians and other religious minorities as scapegoats. In 2008, Christians in Orissa state were targeted because there was a Hindu Swami who was assassinated. Now, the Hindu Swami is in a very remote section of a state in the eastern part of India. And the Maoists claimed responsibility for having killed the Swami. Nonetheless, there was a rampage that went through the area, and as many as 100 were killed, thousands were injured, and up to 50,000 displaced. 10 years later, many Christians still do not want to go back to their homes, and if they do go back to their homes, some are forced to undergo what they call reconversion to Hinduism in order to be able to remain in their homes. A 2014 statement issued by Christian leaders in India talked about the fact that the government needs to respect the Constitution of India and its guarantees of religious freedom. And they said, in a secular and democratic India, there is no place for a state religion. India is not a theocracy. In Nigeria, the violence perpetrated by Boko Haram is ostensibly religious, but its roots stem back to ethnic and sectarian disputes over access to resources and, in certain extent, protests against the corruption in the government and the government's abuse of human rights. Boko Haram continues, and they are equal opportunity persecutors, directing hostility against both Christians and Muslims, and against any institution that does not support their goal of establishing an Islamic State. You're aware, perhaps, of the kidnapping of the Chibok girls in 2014. Some of them are still not back. I think they have gotten about 100 of them back, but others have been sold into slavery or forcibly married. Boko Haram has, in fact, killed more Muslims than they have killed Christians. In Latin America, Cuba serves as a prime example of how governments can impede religious freedom by requiring that all religious activities go through their Office of Religious Affairs of the Cuban Communist Party. And that office can deny permits to repair or build houses of worship. They can freeze bank accounts and even prevent the wives and mothers of jailed activists from attending Mass. So, as you can see, there are abuses of international religious freedom all around the world involving, obviously, Christians, but many, many religions. So what does USCCB do in such cases? The Catholic Church, as you've heard, long has supported international religious freedom. We work to help pass the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998 that brought about the establishment of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom and the Office of International Religious Freedom within the Department of State. We monitor and track legislation related to international religious freedom in Congress. We participate in roundtables and advocate for the passage of appropriate bills. Having said that, I will say that there's a flyer back there about the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, and they put out an annual report. USCIRF, as I call them, is due for reauthorization. And when the bill comes out, I invite all of you to send a letter to your member of Congress saying you support that particular bill. We also have close ties to Ambassador Sam Brownback, who is the Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. And people from USCCB will be attending the ministerial that Monica mentioned, the Ministerial to Advance Religious Freedom. Last year, I believe 87 countries participated. They're hoping this year to have about 100 countries participate. Our advocacy is guided by our contacts with bishops' conferences around the world and with Catholic Relief Services, the humanitarian and development arm of the bishops that works in about 100 countries around the world. We are very careful to make sure that our advocacy reflects issues that the local church wants us to raise, and that we do so in a way that helps rather than hurts the local church. That sometimes people will ask us, why aren't you talking about this or that? And it's because to do so as a Western church advocating on behalf of a local church simply paints more of a target on them and makes them subject to more discrimination, persecution. The U.S. bishops also make solidarity visits to many countries to strengthen ties and learn about the local situation so that when they come back and they can have their meetings with policymakers and discuss what they see on the ground. So are we making any progress? We're working with other non-governmental organizations to raise the profile of international religious freedom in Congress and with the U.S. government as a whole. We've had hearings involving religious leaders, both American and foreign, because sometimes we have foreign bishops coming to the United States, and we arrange for them to meet with members of Congress. The fact that the United States publishes annual report cards on how nations fare in terms of protecting international religious freedom is a plus, particularly if there are sanctions attached to those who are violators. But I'll have to say, in all candor, in the world of diplomacy, security and economic concerns continue to be prioritized over human rights concerns. So what can you do? You can lend your voice and efforts in support of international religious freedom through your own parish. Back there also is a list of partial resources concerning international religious freedom, so you can see some of the different organizations that are involved in promoting religious freedom. You can support them through donations or through some of their advocacy efforts. Catholic organizations like Catholic Relief Services, Catholic Near East Welfare Association, Aid to the Church in Need, Jesuit Refugee Services, all of these help to channel funds to the poorest and vulnerable on the basis of need, not creed. And through national collections and in response to emergencies, both man-made and natural, USCCB puts out appeals for prayers and donations to help those in need, particularly refugees in Iraq and Syria. So we're going to show a very short video done by Aid to the Church in Need, talking about the situation facing Christians in Syria.
Christians have been living in Syria since the 1st century. Today, 1/4 of Syria's Christian population, or up to 400,000, have been displaced or have left the country since the start of the conflict. Entire neighborhoods and towns are left vacant as the fighting and terror increase. This young family fled to Beirut, Lebanon, fearing for their lives. After bombs started hitting their Damascus neighborhood, they felt increasingly threatened, also because of their faith.
As the crisis in our country escalated, I noticed some of my friends acting differently towards me. The problem is, the Christians, in the eyes of the opposition, stand on the side of the regime. Conversely, in the eyes of the regime, we are blamed for not taking sides. The truth is, we don't want to take sides. The Christians simply want peace for Syria.
This man and his family, who have taken refuge in Zakhle, Lebanon, had to flee their village, leaving all their possessions behind after substantial threats were made against them.
As a minority, we lived in harmony with our community. When the rebels arrived and the fighting started, one day they came to our house and asked us to leave, threatening us that if we didn't, they would kill us.
If you are looking at homes, you can see the beautiful tradition of Christians. They brought over there tradition, they brought wisdom, they brought business, they brought peace over there. And they were highly respected always. Now, 28 Christians, one priest. What can you say? Christians are being targeted. They are kidnapped, they are asking for ransom, incredible ransoms. You can never imagine to pay. And unfortunately, they suffer and they weep every single day.
In my opinion, the people who have left and are living abroad, it would be difficult for them to come back. Maybe they will come to visit their parents, family, friends. For those who have started anew, found work, it will be difficult to come back. It is my hope, however, that they will come back. Now, before anything, our people need love and devotion. They need material support as well. They need really everything because they have left everything.
These people, they are asking very hard questions as Christians. Why we are suffering? We are good people. We are not violent people. God is punishing us for what? These questions will be always asked by them, and we have to help to find answer for that. And we have to think about the future. The war, and I believe it will not last forever. We have to give them hope.
So let me just close with a quote from Pope Francis, who lamented religious persecution going on today, especially against Christians, and he denounced those who would distort the use of religion. He said, "Authentic religion is a source of peace and not of violence. Religious freedom is not a right which can be guaranteed solely by existing legislation, though laws are necessary. Rather, religious freedom is a shared space, an atmosphere of respect and cooperation that must be built with everyone's participation, even those who have no religious conviction." So I hope you will all join in building that shared space together. Thank you.
A friend whose husband travels now regularly as a volunteer with Aid to the Church in Need to the Nineveh Plains. He said that he showed disturbing pictures of the churches just bullet-ridden or half destroyed, but there is a lot of hope because we are rebuilding, and they even, just a highlight from one of his visits, celebrated a wedding in these churches that are kind of falling apart, but there's a lot of hope. Thank you all for coming tonight, and I just have a small token for our speakers. It's a little pendant of St. Thomas More, and I just want to say thank you for your courage and keep it up, and if we can help in some way, we will, and maybe we'll just continue the conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming.